In 1987, Nike was number 2. Not rising, not competing. Number 2 behind Reebok. A company from Bolton, England, had walked into America, spotted a gap that Nike completely missed, and taken the throne. Nike's co-founder, Phil Knight, was furious. His company, the brand he built from nothing, was being beaten by a shoe designed for aerobics. And the decision he made next would either save Nike forever or destroy it. This is the story of the most brutal sneaker war in history. Nike versus Reebok. A battle fought with athlete contracts, billion-dollar ad campaigns, a gamble on a rookie nobody wanted to bet on, and a slogan born from the final words of a man facing a firing squad. Inside this story are financial lessons that apply to every business, every investor, and every entrepreneur who has ever faced a moment where everything could go either way. Let's go back to the beginning. Eugene, Oregon, 1962. A University of Oregon track coach named Bill Bowerman was staring at his wife's waffle iron over breakfast. He wasn't thinking about food. He was thinking about grip. Bowerman was obsessed with one thing: making his athletes faster. He'd been making shoes by hand for years, taking apart commercial sneakers, rebuilding them lighter, experimenting with different soles, different materials, different constructions. One morning, he looked up at the grid pattern on the waffle iron and saw the perfect running sole. He poured rubber into it. It worked. Around the same time, one of his former athletes, a young man named Phil Knight, had just come back from a trip to Japan, where he discovered a shoe company called Onitsuka Tiger. The quality was extraordinary. The price was a fraction of what American brands charged. Knight saw the opportunity immediately, not as a shoe lover, but as a businessman. He studied at Stanford Business School. He understood what a quality product at a low price could do in a market. He secured the rights to distribute Onitsuka Tigers in America from his parents' garage. The company was called Blue Ribbon Sports. Knight sold shoes out of the back of his car at track meets. In the first year, he made $8,000. It wasn't a business yet. It was just two men chasing something they believed in. But in 1971, everything changed. The relationship with Onitsuka Tiger collapsed. They needed their own brand. A graphic design student named Carolyn Davidson was paid $35 to create a logo. She sketched a curved stripe representing the wing of Nike, the Greek goddess of victory. The swoosh, $35, one of the most valuable logos ever created. The company rebranded as Nike. For 2 decades, the brand stayed quiet, well respected in running circles, worn by serious athletes, barely known outside of England. Then, in 1979, at a trade show in Chicago, a camping equipment wholesaler from Massachusetts walked past their stand. His name was Paul Fireman. Fireman had no background in athletic footwear, but he immediately saw what the Foster brothers had. He negotiated the rights to distribute Reebok in North America for an annual royalty of $1.5 million. For 5 years, growth was modest. Reebok was a niche product in a crowded market. Then, a salesman named Angel Martinez attended his wife's aerobic class, and everything changed. Martinez looked around the room. He saw the aerobic instructor in running shoes, half the class in running shoes, the other half, no shoes at all. He had his idea. Nobody was making a shoe specifically for women. Nobody was making a shoe specifically for aerobics. Nike was focused on male runners and basketball players. Adidas was focused on football and track. The entire women's fitness market, which was exploding in the 1980s, was completely unserved. Reebok launched the Freestyle in 1982. Soft glove leather, cushioned sole, designed specifically for the aerobics studio. The first athletic shoe ever made for women. It was an instant phenomenon. Sybil Shepherd wore them to the Emmy Awards. Mick Jagger wore them in a music video. Jane Fonda, whose aerobic tapes were selling millions, was photographed in them constantly. Reebok sales in 1983, $13 million. Reebok sales in 1985, $310 million. That's a 2,000% increase in 2 years. By 1986, Reebok had overtaken Nike as the #1 athletic shoe brand in America. This is one of the most important market lessons in business history. Nike had the technology, the reputation, the distribution, and the money. Reebok had none of that. What Reebok had was an underserved market that Nike had chosen to ignore. In business, you don't always win by being better. Sometimes you win by simply looking at who nobody else is selling to. Phil Knight saw the numbers, and he knew Nike was in serious trouble. Beaverton, Oregon, 1984. Nike's basketball division was in crisis. Reebok was dominating the women's market. Nike was losing ground in every direction. And inside Nike, a consultant named Sonny Vaccaro was about to make the most controversial suggestion in the company's history. Nike had a budget of $250,000 to spend on basketball endorsements. The plan was to split it between 3 players. Safe, diversified approach. Vaccaro had a different idea. Put it all on one rookie, a 21-year-old from North Carolina named Michael Jordan. Phil Knight was unconvinced. Jordan hadn't played a single professional game. The 1984 draft was loaded. Hakeem Olajuwon, Charles Barkley, John Stockton. Why bet everything on an unproven kid? Vaccaro was relentless. He believed Jordan was a generational talent, not just an athlete, but a personality. Someone who could transcend sport and become a cultural icon. The problem was, Jordan didn't even want to sign with Nike. Jordan wore Converse in college. His favorite brand was Adidas. When Nike came calling, he almost didn't take the meeting. It was only his mother, Dolores, who convinced him to fly to Oregon. She told him, "Michael, at least go and listen to what they have to say." He went. What Nike offered was extraordinary and unprecedented. Not just $250,000 per year, already more than any basketball player ever received, but something no brand had ever offered an athlete before: a revenue share, a percentage of every shoe sold. This was unheard of. On October 18th, Nike created a revolutionary new basketball shoe. The NBA threw them out of the game. Fortunately, the NBA can't stop you from wearing them. Sales of Air Jordans in the first year, $126 million. Nike's original 3-year projection for the line. They exceeded their 3-year target in the first 12 months. The Jordan deal is the most important lesson in risk management this story has to offer. Nike concentrated their entire basketball budget on one unproven player. Every financial advisor in the world would have told them to diversify, but diversification protects you from catastrophic loss. Concentration is how you generate extraordinary gains. The greatest investors in history, Buffett, Lynch, Munger, all say the same thing. When you find something truly exceptional, bet heavily. The risk of over-concentration is real, but so is the risk of being so diversified you can never outperform. Nike had their weapon. Now they needed their battle cry. Portland, Oregon, 1988. The numbers were grim. Reebok's annual sales, $1.67 billion. Nike's annual sales, $1.2 billion. Reebok was still winning. Nike hired an advertising agency run by two men named Dan Whedon and David Kennedy. Whedon plus Kennedy was small, scrappy, and relatively unknown, but Phil Knight gave them the brief anyway. The night before the campaign launch, Whedon had 5 different TV commercials ready, and they didn't connect. They were funny, emotional, dramatic. They felt fragmented. They needed one line that tied everything together. Whedon stayed up all night. His mind drifted to a story he remembered from Portland. A man from Oregon who had spent most of his life committing crimes, who had murdered 2 people in separate robberies, who had been placed in front of a firing squad in Utah in 1977. Just before shots were fired, the warden asked if he had any final words. The man looked up. "Let's do it." Whedon couldn't shake these words. 3 words. Face to face with death. No hesitation. He changed one word. Just do it. He brought it to Nike the next morning. Phil Knight hated it. "We don't need that," Knight said. Whedon ran it anyway. The first Just Do It ad featured an 80-year-old man named Walt Stack, who ran 17 miles every morning across the Golden Gate Bridge. Simple, inspiring, universal. It aired in 1988, and the world responded. Nike sales in 1988, $877 million. Nike sales by the end of the 1990s, $9.2 billion. One slogan, one decade, a 900% revenue increase. But the story of how Just Do It defeated Reebok isn't just about the slogan. It's about what happened at the exact same moment on the other side of the rivalry. Reebok launched their own major campaign in 1988. It was called You Be You. The message was about individuality, expressing yourself, being who you are. It was creative, it was thoughtful, and it completely failed to connect. Reebok's marketing team could see it wasn't working. So they did what struggling companies always do when a campaign underperforms. They pulled back the ad spend. While Reebok were pumping the brakes, Nike was flooring the accelerator. They doubled the media buy, produced a dozen new Just Do It executions, mixed professional athletes with everyday people, made it feel like it belonged to everyone. By the end of 1989, Nike had reclaimed the #1 position in American athletic footwear, and they have never given it back. This is the lesson about playing to win versus playing not to lose. Reebok, at the top, became cautious. They managed their lead. They protected their position. They hedged. Nike, from second place, had nothing to protect, so they attacked. In business and in investing, the players who win in the long run are almost always the ones who play offensively, not the ones who play defense. The early 1990s, Nike had reclaimed the top spot, but Reebok wasn't finished. Their answer to Nike was the Reebok Pump, an inflatable chamber inside the shoe that you could pump up for a customized fit. You pressed a small orange basketball on the tongue of the shoe. It inflated. You pressed a button on the heel. It deflated. It was gimmicky. It was brilliant. It was a marketing sensation. The pump launched in 1989 at $170, almost double the average sneaker price. It sold out in days. At the 1991 NBA Slam Dunk Contest, a player named D. Brown, before his first dunk, bent down and pumped up his Reeboks in front of millions watching on television. He won the contest. Reebok sold every pair they had. Nike hit back with Air Max, a visible cushioning unit in the sole that you could literally see through the shoe. The technology wasn't just functional. It was a statement. You could see what you were getting. The two companies were now locked in a technology arms race. Every season brought new innovation. Every innovation brought new ad campaign. Every ad campaign pushed both brands further into culture. And here is the financial reality of what this arms race created. By competing with each other so aggressively, Nike and Reebok didn't just grow their own business. They created an entirely new industry. Sneaker culture, collector culture, streetwear culture. The concept of a shoe as a status symbol, as something you queue overnight to buy, something that trades on secondary markets for 10 times retail, was born directly from this rivalry. But while the technology war raged, Reebok was quietly making a decision that will ultimately end the rivalry forever. By the early 2000s, the gap between Nike and Reebok had become a chasm. Nike's annual revenue approaching $10 billion. Reebok's annual revenue, $3 billion. Reebok had become a strong, profitable company, but it was no longer in the same conversation as Nike. It had lost the basketball market to Jordan. It had lost the running market to Nike's relentless innovation. It had lost the cultural conversation entirely. And Paul Fireman, the man who had built Reebok in America from nothing, was looking for a way out. The phone rang. It was Adidas. Adidas had a problem. They were the #1 sports brand in Europe, but in America, the most lucrative market in the world, they had barely 5% market share. Reebok, they believed, was their entry point. In 2005, Adidas announced the acquisition of Reebok for $3.8 billion. It was described as a merger of two giants.